If you want to understand who actually controls the world, you have to start by following the money. For generations, the United States, its allies, and its citizens have comforted themselves with one single number. When evaluating raw financial figures, the United States appears to remain the military hegemon of planet Earth. In fiscal year 2024, the United States defense budget reached $874 billion, accounting for 13% of all federal spending. And the trajectory is only going straight up. In 2025, the U.S. spent $921 billion on its military, with the White House subsequently requesting a $1.5 trillion defense budget for the 2027 fiscal year. By contrast, the officially reported 2024 defense budget for the People's Republic of China stood at 1.67 trillion yuan. If you pull out your phone right now and type that into a currency converter, it translates to roughly $232 billion. On a standard financial spreadsheet, the math is reassuring. It tells a simple story. America outspends its primary strategic competitor by nearly 4 to 1. Therefore, American dominance is a mathematical certainty. But military strategists and defense analysts across the globe are sounding an alarm. Because this chart, this massive blue bar, it relies on a fatal accounting error. Evaluating these budgets using standard exchange rates is fundamentally flawed. Market rates are useful if you are buying imported iPhones, but militaries do not do their shopping on the international market. The People's Liberation Army does not buy its submarines in dollars, it buys them in yuan, using localized Chinese supply chains. To understand the true balance of power, we must use purchasing power parity, or PPP. It's a simple concept. Your money goes further in a developing economy. But to get an accurate picture, we also have to look at what China's official ledger leaves out. The Chinese Coast Guard, the People's Armed Police, and massive military pension systems are entirely off the books. Add those in, and China's actual baseline expenditure instantly rises from $232 billion to nearly $298 billion. When you apply the PPP adjustment to that comprehensive total, the mathematical reality violently flips. China's localized purchasing power actually surges to an estimated $474 billion. Compare that to the equivalent comprehensive U.S. defense-related spending, which includes off-book items like the VA and nuclear programs, of $1.3 trillion. Yes, the U.S. is still the top spender, but that $474 billion represents over 36% of the American total. The illusion of a 4 to 1 advantage vanishes. In the brutal reality of steel, shipyards, and manpower, a spreadsheet error is masking how rapidly the gap has closed. And to understand how an $874 billion advantage just evaporates into thin air, we have to follow the money. We have to look at the single most expensive piece of equipment in the American arsenal: the human being. To comprehend why the U.S. spending advantage fails to translate proportionally to the battlefield, you first have to analyze the human cost of maintaining a military in a wealthy Western democracy. The United States Department of Defense operates as one of the largest single employers on the globe, maintaining an active duty force of approximately 1.5 million personnel. But employing Americans is exceptionally, astronomically expensive. Data indicates that in 2024, a staggering 60% of the $874 billion U.S. defense budget was consumed entirely by operation and maintenance, alongside military personnel costs. Specifically, $332 billion, or 38%, was allocated to operation and maintenance, which encompasses the military healthcare system, training, and facilities, while $192 billion, or 22%, was dedicated directly to military personnel salaries and retirement. Before the Pentagon has bought a single new fighter jet, submarine, or rifle, more than half of its budget has evaporated into simply paying the people who wear the uniform. Unlike nations with compulsory military service, the United States operates an all-volunteer force. To attract and retain a professional, long-serving military, the Pentagon must actively compete with a highly lucrative private sector. You aren't just drafting citizens, you are competing with tech companies, logistic firms, and commercial airlines for talent. Consequently, the U.S. military provides a robust, multifaceted compensation package. It is essentially a comprehensive welfare state operating within a hyper-capitalist country. To compete with the private sector, the U.S. military provides tax-free housing allowances, globally unmatched base salaries, and a staggering $326 billion Veterans Affairs healthcare apparatus. In the 2025 budget request, total military compensation effectively reached $600 billion. Before a single jet is purchased, the budget is gone. By stark contrast, the People's Republic of China operates its military through a fundamentally different economic model. The People's Liberation Army, which commands an estimated 7,054,000 total personnel when counting active forces, reserves, and paramilitaries, relies heavily on a system of conscription. These young conscripted soldiers receive merely a token monthly subsidy and a one-time discharge bonus. Their compensation is roughly on par with the poorest demographics in Chinese society. While career non-commissioned officers receive higher pay, it effectively equates to a basic living wage comparable to entry-level civilian positions in the domestic Chinese economy. There are no multi-billion-dollar suburban housing allowances. There is no equivalent to the $326 billion American Veterans Affairs apparatus. As former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, observed during congressional testimony, the cost of labor is the silent equalizer in these economic equations. While American workers are measured as being vastly more productive at market exchange rates, the exponential difference in wages means that hundreds of billions of dollars of the supposed U.S. defense spending advantage are completely absorbed just maintaining the American standard of living. This expenditure is morally sound and practically necessary to secure domestic recruitment. But make no mistake, on the international stage, paying an American soldier 10 times what a Chinese soldier makes purchases exactly 0 additional physical combat power. You cannot fire a payroll at an enemy ship, and to see where the real combat power is generated, we have to look at the shipyards. While personnel costs hollow out the nominal budget advantage, the purchasing power parity gap reaches its most critical, dangerous, and terrifying disparity in the realm of heavy manufacturing. Welcome to the shipyard math. When the United States Navy commissions the construction of a new Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, a 9,900-ton vessel that forms the absolute backbone of the American surface fleet, the financial requirement is intense. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that the latest Flight 3 variants of the Arleigh Burke cost approximately $2.7 billion each, while historical averages sit around $2.2 billion. Why are American ships so unfathomably expensive? Because the U.S. Navy is forced to buy its ships from a domestic industry that has endured decades of structural collapse. In 1975, the United States stood as the dominant global player in shipbuilding. Yet today, its share of the worldwide commercial shipbuilding market has plummeted to a microscopic 0.1%. Following the cessation of meaningful commercial vessel construction subsidies by the U.S. government near the end of the Cold War in the 1980s, the domestic industry experienced a severe fatal contraction. Active shipyards went bankrupt, output cratered, specialized employment vanished. Today, the U.S. shipbuilding sector survives almost entirely on life support via the Jones Act, which mandates that vessels used in domestic commerce be built, owned, and crewed by Americans. Because US-built ships can cost 4 or more times the global market price, almost no overseas commercial entity has purchased a large US-built ship in decades. Shipyard entry-level wages in the US hover around $21 per hour, rates comparable to the retail or fast food sectors, yet the industry is starved of consistent investment and struggles with severe workforce attrition. This creates a lethal economic trap called overhead. If a commercial shipyard builds 100 cargo ships a year and one Navy ship, the profit from the 100 cargo ships pays for the cranes, the electricity, the dry docks, and the facility upkeep. The Navy only pays for the warship. But because America builds virtually zero commercial ships, when the US Navy orders a warship, it must absorb the entirety of the overhead cost for a hollowed-out, consolidated defense industrial base that lacks any commercial scale. In stark contrast, when China builds its equivalent surface combatant, the Type 052D destroyer, a highly capable warship equipped with advanced radar and a 64-cell vertical launch system, the cost is estimated at roughly $600 million. Even their larger, more sophisticated Type 055 destroyer is estimated to cost around $800 million. This immense cost disparity exists because China effectively serves as the manufacturing floor of the maritime world. The scale of China's shipbuilding capacity is almost impossible to overstate. According to unclassified US Navy intelligence data, China currently possesses 232 times the shipbuilding capacity of the United States. In 2024 alone, China completed over 1,000 commercial vessels. The United States produced just 8. Chinese shipyards led the global industry for the 15th consecutive year in 2024, securing an overwhelming 74.1% of all new global maritime orders. To illustrate the pure magnitude of this dominance, China's largest state-owned shipbuilder, the China State Shipbuilding Corporation, or CSSC, built 14 million tons of large ocean-going vessels in 2024. During that exact same year, the entire U.S. shipbuilding industry managed to produce roughly 76,000 tons. Let that sink in. In a single calendar year, one Chinese state-owned entity constructed more commercial vessel tonnage than the entire American shipbuilding industry has built since the end of World War II. China leverages this commercial monopoly to directly augment its naval modernization through a deliberate national strategy known as military-civil fusion. China operates an extensive network of over 300 shipyards. Many of these function as dual-use facilities where commercial bulk carriers and advanced PLA Navy warships are constructed simultaneously, side by side in the exact same dry docks by the exact same workers. This strategy allows the Chinese state to share overhead costs, sustain workforce continuity, and smoothly spread advanced technological integration across both civilian and military sectors. And here is the ultimate bitter irony for the West. The global market is essentially subsidizing the Chinese naval buildup. Foreign commercial entities, including firms headquartered in nations allied with the United States, purchase 75% of the ships manufactured at these Chinese dual-use yards. This overwhelming commercial demand funnels billions of dollars in international revenue directly into China's naval industrial base. Furthermore, the Chinese state heavily intervenes to suppress raw material costs. According to reports to the World Trade Organization, China accounted for 42% of global steel exports in 2024, redirecting surpluses of state-subsidized, low-priced steel into the shipbuilding sector provides an insurmountable material advantage. The result? A standard commercial container ship costs roughly $60 million to construct in China. That exact same ship would cost a prohibitive $330 million to build in the United States. When applying purchasing power parity adjustments to mature, heavy manufacturing sectors like naval procurement, the conclusion is absolute. Every single dollar the Chinese government allocates to hardware buys significantly more steel, sensor arrays, and physical combat capability than an equivalent dollar pushed through the broken American system. But the final and perhaps most consequential variable in the erosion of American financial supremacy is not merely how the capital is spent, nor the localized cost of the hardware it procures. It is precisely where that capital is deployed. Welcome to the geography of money. The United States operates as a global hegemon. It views itself as the guarantor of international maritime trade and the enforcer of a security architecture that spans the entire planet. Consequently, its defense budget is stretched incredibly dangerously thin across vast geographical distances. To maintain this global posture, the U.S. maintains a footprint of nearly 4,790 military sites globally. Specifically, the Pentagon sustains an estimated 750 base sites spread across 80 foreign countries and territories. This global presence is an exorbitant financial drain. Research indicates that stationing military personnel overseas adds an average of $10,000 to $40,000 in additional operational costs per person per year compared to domestic stationing. The permanent overseas military presence alone costs American taxpayers $10 billion annually, consuming roughly 2% of the total U.S. defense budget before a single combat operation is even authorized or a major piece of equipment is purchased. To sustain these forces, the U.S. military relies on deeply vulnerable logistical supply chains stretching across both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Military theorists categorize this as the complex logistics of war. If a U.S. Navy ship needs a replacement radar module in the South China Sea, it has to be flown or shipped thousands of miles from the continental United States. The cost of a gallon of jet fuel multiplies exponentially when it has to be transported via vulnerable tanker ships across the largest body of water on Earth. The geopolitical pivot to manage rising peer competitors has incurred staggering costs. Analysts estimate that between 2012 and 2024, the United States spent at least $3.4 trillion specifically focused on countering China militarily. Averaging $260 billion a year, this targeted expenditure alone exceeds the entire $2.3 trillion the United States spent during 20 years of war in Afghanistan. China's military strategy, by contrast, relies on a distinct, overwhelming geographic advantage: extreme regional concentration. Operating largely without the mandate to police global shipping lanes or maintain expeditionary bases across multiple continents, China's $474 billion in military purchasing power is aggressively and efficiently focused on its absolute immediate neighborhood. In the Indo-Pacific theater, China spends 5 times as much on defense as Japan and nearly 7 times as much as South Korea. This localized hyper-concentration is designed to fulfill a singular geographic objective: dominating the first island chain and securing absolute supremacy in the Western Pacific. Because China's forces operate adjacent to their own mainland, they completely bypass the immense supply chain vulnerabilities that plague American expeditionary forces. They don't need a fleet of vulnerable oilers and logistics ships to move fuel 6,000 miles across an ocean. They have land-based supply depots, rail networks, and airfields directly behind their forces. Ultimately, the geography of money dictates a harsh, unavoidable truth. The United States pays a premium merely to arrive at the theater of conflict. China invests its capital wholesale to dominate it. For generations, the United States has relied upon its sheer economic gravity to dictate the outcomes of geopolitical conflict. The underlying assumption of the post-war American security apparatus has been that the nation possessing the largest gross domestic product and the highest nominal defense budget would inherently wield superior production, infinite capital, and an insurmountable deterrent capability. If a problem arose, the U.S. believed it could simply outspend its rivals. It was the ultimate checkbook empire. But the foundational math of modern global power has irrevocably changed. In a world increasingly defined by the realities of purchasing power parity, off-book shadow expenditures, and highly asymmetric industrial capacity, a bloated top-line budget is no longer a guaranteed measure of strength. The United States defense budget may still technically rank as the largest on Earth. Yet, in the brutal physical reality of empty shipyards, astronomical missile production facilities, and personnel compensation, America is discovering a dangerous existential vulnerability. The title of the world's richest country provides very little tactical advantage if the cost to manufacture a single destroyer is 4 times higher than your adversaries'. It provides no advantage if your domestic commercial shipbuilding capacity has withered to 0.1% of the global market, leaving your Navy to pay the overhead for an entire dying industry. And it provides no deterrence if the vast majority of your trillion-dollar defense budget is consumed by healthcare, housing allowances, and the maintenance of a sprawling, exhausted global footprint, rather than the actual acquisition of steel and silicon. China has systematically bypassed the nominal dollar by leveraging state-subsidized industrial materials, a monopoly on commercial shipbuilding, highly skilled yet affordable labor, and the relentless economic engine of military-civil fusion. Beijing buys vastly more physical combat power for every unit of currency spent. The comforting belief that the United States maintains an invincible 3-to-1 spending advantage over its greatest rival is a profound economic illusion. It is a story of how a systemic reliance on standard market exchange rates has blinded analysts and the public to a rapidly shifting balance of power. We have been looking at the spreadsheet while ignoring the shipyard. It is a spreadsheet error, and if left uncorrected, it is an error that could ultimately cost America the Pacific.